Hi, everybody. This session is all about JDK choice and what's the criteria for making your JDK choice. This is planned to be an AMA, but it's not really an AMA. It's sort of like a AUAJC, like ask us anything about JDK choice, I guess. So before we get started on questions from you guys, from the audience, I certainly have my questions, but let's go to Gene, to Sai, and to Simon, and to Tony, to just introduce yourselves, and then we can start.
Hi, I'm Jean Boyarsky. I'm the Java track lead, so you've been hearing from me all day, and I work for a bank in New York City.
Hi all, I'm Sai Donti. I work for a bank in New York City as a Java application developer.
Different bank. Got to represent multiple banks here.
And I'm Simon Ritter, and I work for Azul. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Tony Prentices. I work for hashtag Twitter VM team.
And is what, co-author of G1? Designer of G1?
The first one.
The first?
And original implementer of CMS.
Whoa. Okay, so I have I have a lot of questions and things to talk about, but do you guys have any opening questions? I know Kirk does. Anybody have any opening questions?
I do. That's okay. A different speaker this morning said during his presentation, is he here? No, I don't think he is. He said during his presentation, we've been having the 2-month cadence, the 6-month Java release cadence for a couple of years now. It's been fantastic. Who thinks that it's been fantastic?
I'd just like to say the reason he's not here is because he's actually presenting in another room.
Yeah. So is your question like about the 6-month? This is the 6-month cadence, release cadence, or excuse me, the release train. Actually, how many people like the 6-month release train?
I like it because Java is in the news more often, and because it forces the 3-year release train, which is the one I care about. I'm only going to use an LTS, and knowing when that is coming is valuable to me.
I like it definitely from an application developer perspective because they get to be on top of what's happening new, and also we can catch up with other languages. But then from a firm perspective, it's not going to be helpful because it introduces a lot of new additional costs. And also a large firm like where I work, it's not easy to change production systems that easier.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I like it because, well, it's great for our business. But I do actually, I do think it's good from the point of view of having predictable release cadence, and I think that we are getting features faster now. So from that point of view, I do quite like it. But I do know that having that faster release cadence is, as you said, a lot of organizations can't change JDK every 6 months. That's just not practical. So it is going to be a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I agree with that. 6 months, I think, is a bit too fast. I think at Twitter, we are able to move a little bit faster than a lot of other organizations, I would claim, but we still cannot move to every release every 6 months. 1 year would be a hard sell. A year and a half, maybe.
Okay, so you work in a major, person works in a major organization, and your manager says, we have to choose a JDK. And they said, like, please choose a JDK for us. What do you do?
Okay, well, my company cares a lot about paying for long-term support using both definitions of the word support, which limits us to one of several companies. Currently, we're still using Oracle because we had a long support contract and it hasn't come due yet. The next time it comes due, we do have to start thinking about that decision of does it make sense to stay with the one we're on or change. And I think the things we're looking at are First of all, what kind of support is given and does it match what we need? Because we care about both patches and being able to go to someone if we have a problem. And then we would look as a secondary factor to cost, both per developer seat and per CPU. Oracle charges a very small amount per developer seat and a very large amount per CPU, and we would need to see where we stand on that and how it relates to what other vendors provide. Additionally, with the introduction of cloud, Oracle's JDK is extremely unfriendly when you try to run it in something like Docker, and that's an increasing concern for us.
From my perspective, within the firm that I work with, there's a very centralized Java platform, which is pretty much every application Java developer will use that particular platform to build their code and deploy to production. So which means all the development teams get the support for free. I mean, they don't have to spend individually from their line of business or the budgets. So there's a central team that takes care of this. So that also means if there is a change has to be done, the central team will take a year or two to get there. I mean, we are not on Java 9 yet in production through the central team yet. So that kind of tells you.
Nor should you be.
11th.
No, I'm clear about it. We are still on Java 8 from the central team.
But you're going to go to 9? You're
Oh,
not
no,
gonna jump to
that's
11.
right. Sorry, yeah, we're going to go to 11, yeah, directly.
I went to QCon,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said to go to Java 9.
No, sorry for that. Yeah. So, but on the other side, there are a few teams who are experimenting with the latest Java versions directly. But then that comes with the responsibility that team takes total responsibility for production support and signing a separate contract with Oracle, which they don't want to do it, obviously. So with that, within the firm that I work with, it is going to be from one LTS to another LTS.
So, Sives, just one point on that. So, if you have different groups that have different support contracts, does that mean like one group would have an Oracle contract and one group would have, not that they would, an Amazon contract, and other?
Can't have an Amazon contract.
Is that so? You have multiple contracts?
Actually, that's true. So Simon Ritter would be very happy as well because, well, we are one of the customers. So there are groups within the organization which use Azul because of high performance. So there is a separate contract with Azul for that team specifically.
But how about it's certainly Azul is like really good for the low latency applications.
Right.
For say general purpose computing, is it typically like the Oracle contract or is it other vendors?
I think it's the majority is Oracle contract. Other than that, if a particular team needs a separate JVM for specific purposes, then they would go out and sign a separate contract with the team,
Interesting.
with the company.
Okay.
I thought of one more thing whilst I was talking that's really important, which is the length of supporting a JDK. We are just getting the tail end of our applications off Java 6 now, and while most of the JDK commercial companies still support Java 6, not all do, so that's something to look at to make sure that we're going to have Java 7 and Java 8 support for a really long time.
Actually, I believe we're the only people who still support JDK 6,
Yeah,
other than Oracle.
Oracle actually stopped last year.
Right. That's true, yes.
Even if you pay for super extended support, it's gone now.
That's right. So we are the only people who support JDK 6 now. Yes. What?
So there's somebody with a microphone. Kirk has a question or statement.
No, it's not a question.
Wait for the microphone.
Question. Here you go, Mike.
Sorry, we're just stating that we do support JDK 6.
And can you say who we is?
J Clarity.
Thank you.
Yes, question over there.
Yeah, so wait for the mic.
Hold on a second.
We wanted to have the mic because everything's recorded.
Just a small question. You're all talking about supporting the JDK. It's fine, but can you just illustrate a case where you really needed to have support on the JDK?
Right. Okay, so I can give you an example of that. So this is where we talk about the difference between maintenance and support. So maintenance is the idea of providing the updates backported from the code that Oracle contributes to the most recent release. Support is where, like you say, you have an issue, you ring up somebody and you say, look, something doesn't work and we need it to be fixed. So I can give you a good example of one that we dealt with, which was one of our customers is Workday. And they deployed the JDK into their environment, and they actually experienced a problem which turned up in a certain situation. They reported it through the JDK, OpenJDK bug reporting mechanism, and Oracle closed it as could not reproduce because it was a very complex environment that they needed to actually generate that. So basically what our engineers did was said, okay, we will try and fix it. And we were faced with quite a difficult situation because Workday obviously have a lot of proprietary data, and they couldn't just give us access to their machines. So we had to either use heavily scrubbed log files, or we had a sort of, basically a sort of like webcast type interface into their system where we could get very minimal information. But we were able to actually figure out what the problem was and then generate a fix for that. But you're right. I mean, the number of people who actually find problems in the JDK that need fixing, which are not dealt with through the Open JDK and Oracle, are quite small. But if it is something that affects you, then it could be a significant thing.
Yeah, so we have a slightly different scenario because like we have our own VM team, so we support ourselves, I guess. And my team's customers are actually our Twitter developers, and it's not common, but quite frequently we have some issue in production that is like some, the service hitting some edge case in either the libraries or in the GC or in the VM, and having some expertise to go there, understand what's going on, maybe add custom observability or custom observability features to try to work out what's going on, and then going to fix it is actually valuable for us. So, smaller companies cannot afford maybe having a VM team, but having somebody that can do that. You're welcome, Simon. It's really important.
So that's interesting. So on the panel here, we have two people from companies that are users of JDK. We have a vendor, and then Tony, you guys decided to roll your own, right? So what was the rationale?
So the decision was made before my time. I joined the team maybe about a year later. So that was almost 6 years ago. I can probably imagine how the conversation went. It's like, well, Twitter's getting bigger, move to the JDK. I would like some support for the reasons I just described, actually. Okay, how much does it cost? And then you get, you kind of get an estimate. And, we have several data centers, thousands and thousands and thousands of machines per data center. Unfortunately, I can't disclose the number. And I'm sure the bill will have been quite astronomical. So they said, oh, maybe we can hire some, engineers and OpenJDK contributors to actually maintain it. And six years later, it's been working great. And in fact, now with all the, the fact that we have to be more active in supporting our JDK and doing a bit more work than we did before, it's actually now become even more important. So yeah, just as a summary, cost is definitely important. I still need to do the calculation of how much it will have actually cost to get support for a year, given the number of machines we have, and then how much like our team costs, and maybe ask for, I don't know, 0.5% of the difference. So cost is important. Speed is important for us. Speed as in like there is an issue, we're there, we're on call, we can immediately answer it, and we have the expertise to resolve issues, understand what's going on and try to help our developers. Once some developers, some team hit an issue in production, and in the JDK, and the issue might have been our own fault. I will not confirm that, but we literally had like a new release of the JDK within like a couple of hours that resolved the issue. And I don't think, no, I'm not picking on you, but I don't think you can get such a fast turnaround from a vendor. That's nothing. Did that answer that?
Yes, thank you. You had a question over here.
Yeah, thanks. Historically, we just used the OpenJDK for years and never had to, use support and stuff like that. So I'm trying to understand and get an overview of what, other than support and the costs behind that, what are the alternatives and considerations companies need to take when they choose their JDK provider?
But so other than cost, what's the criteria for choosing a JDK?
Yep.
Anybody?
Well, Sai alluded to one earlier, which is performance. Another one, which is low-hanging fruit, is if the provider you're using for something else is providing a JDK. So if you're on Amazon, you should probably use their JDK. In a lot of cases, it probably won't matter, and using a common one makes sense. And if you have a special use case, you probably know about it already, or you will encounter it and then you'll know about it. I'm curious to see what everyone else thinks on this one.
Okay, yeah, I'll dig into this one. So the real key thing that's really affected this whole decision process is the changes that Oracle made around about the time that JDK 9 came out. So in addition to saying that they were moving to a 6-month release cadence, they also said that they were going to stop doing support, long-term support, for free. So long-term support from Oracle is only for the Oracle JDK. So OpenJDK doesn't have the concept of long-term support. OpenJDK, and I'm actually in the process of writing a blog post about this. OpenJDK is the source code for the JDK. Now, depending on who is the project lead for each project, there will be support for a period of time if somebody wants to lead that project, because Oracle now resign the leadership of the project after 6 months, every project. And then it's up to somebody else to take over. So in the case of 11, Andrew Haley of Red Hat was taken over. He also did the project lead for 8. He was the project lead for 7. In fact, he was the project lead for 6. He then resigned that, and Andrew Breigen took over from Azul to be the project lead of that. So that's how we were able to still provide support for those. So the key thing now is deciding where you get your updates from, because the updates are the key thing. If you want to carry on using JDK 8, you certainly can, because the license allows you to use it for free. But Oracle are not providing updates to JDK 8 unless you pay them for Java SE subscription. So the question is, who do you go to for your updates? And there are a variety of providers. So obviously there's Azul, we do that as a commercial business. There's Adopt Open JDK, JClarity, there's IBM with J9, there's Red Hat, there's Amazon. There's a couple, it's surprising, there's actually people sort of popping up who are providing support for the JDK. So Pivotal is one who came out recently. Alibaba have a JDK that they provide support for. I'm trying to think who else is there. Who's the Russian guys? Is it? No. No, Excelsior, they went bust. Yeah. So there's a couple of Russian guys as well who do it, but there's actually a range of different JDKs that you can choose from now. But the idea is that they're all building mostly from the OpenJDK source code, and the question is how you get the backporting of the fixes into that particular version.
It was a question. I couldn't. Yeah, mine was a question. While we were talking about the vendors, at Code 1 last year, Red Hat got up and talked about how they were leading the support of everything, and then IBM announced they were taking over. Do any of you know if that's going to continue?
Right. Okay, so one thing we need to be very careful about here, and this is something that is quite precise, is Red Hat are not the lead of the project. It's Andrew Haley who works for Red Hat. So it's actually important to make that distinction, because the OpenJDK is a project that has contributors to it. And even though Andrew Haley works for Red Hat, he is not actually representing Red Hat in that capacity. So it's not Red Hat who are leading it, it's Andrew Haley who's leading it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So IBM is also offering support for Adopt OpenJDK,
Yeah, but that's only J9, isn't it?
Nope, the whole stack, everything. Okay, so the question is, like, we have all of these sources for OpenJDK, and this is a question we keep running into, is how do we ensure compatibility from each of the sources right now? Because, effectively, we've forked, maybe, or haven't we? Opinions on that? Have we forked? I think Twitter's forked. Alibaba's certainly forked. Has Amazon forked? Has Azul forked?
Well, I mean, effectively, yes.
And how do we ensure, I don't think, is the TCK actually adequate to prove compatibility anymore? And if so, where do we go next?
Before you give up the mic, Kirk, I have a follow-up question about defining fork. because some of these forks don't have a future in that, like Azul has their Java 8, they're not building Java 9 on top of Java 8. They're maintaining it until eventually Java 8 goes away. So those forks are less worrisome than something like the Hudson Jenkins split. So can you be precise?
Every time they patch a problem in Java 6, the question is, do they port that patch forward to Java whatever? And does that patch actually get contributed back to OpenJDK so that it becomes part of the base? Not Azul, but this is a question for across the board.
Thank you for clarifying the question.
Right, exactly. I don't want to pick on any vendors.
No, no. Okay, so I'll have another go at answering that one. Let's see if I can kind of like pick it out. So I guess the thing that we're looking at is the eventual consistency, because no. I mean, no. Bear with me.
Starting well.
It is. Okay, so to give you an example. Okay, so Azul independently backport fixes from the current release into older releases because we have an SLA that we provide to our customers that say that within a certain time, we will ensure that you have those updates. So we can't rely on OpenJDK to do that for us because it's an open source project, so we don't know who's going to do it. Sure, Red Hat does it, but we can't rely on that. So we effectively fork the JDK to backport those fixes. But once other people do that and the fixes are upstreamed into the OpenJDK project, then we will effectively abandon that fork and we will go to using the standard OpenJDK project. So that's what I say about eventual consistency.
That's a backport of a fix. What about a fix back that's not pushed forward? Not upstreamed. Not upstreamed.
But how
backporting, I understand. Upstreaming is the issue. So you find a problem in 6 that really hasn't been found in 9 or 10.
Right. So, I mean, what we do with that is, because we're maintaining 6, we will actually upstream it into 6, and then we will look at whether it affects later versions. And then the idea would be to try and contribute that to the other newer versions.
I'm going to add to that from the customer point of view that this seems like an issue that I'm unlikely to care about. I care about fixes from the point of view of I'm on the latest with respect to security holes, and I believe that everybody's fixing the security holes in their fork, I hope. And if I personally encounter a defect at my company that's being fixed, I care that that's fixed, and that I'm going to be on top of to make sure it gets ported in.
So security is a little bit of an easier thing. Yeah. No, from a consistency point of view, security is easier. The reason I say that is because there is the OpenJDK vulnerability group, and that is the group that was started by Oracle, which also has a number of other JDK, JVM vendors involved in it. So you've got people like Twitter, you've got people like Azul, Red Hat, IBM, all the usual suspects are there. So the security fixes are actually developed within this group. So it's not just Oracle who are developing the fixes and testing them. It's the whole group that are doing that. So everybody who's basically building a JDK has advanced access and advanced knowledge of what's happening in terms of security fixes. So pretty much all the vendors are going to have the same thing, same baseline in terms of security patches when the next update comes out. It's more the bug fixes that are a little bit of an issue in terms of backporting and so on.
And security fixes are what get me to update every quarter. If there was a bug fix, I would call whatever the behavior was. It's like, well, that's how Java 8 works, and deal with it until it's time to upgrade again. But security, I have to upgrade for.
But we've had experiences where moving between different VMs actually creates things where all of a sudden your memory is inflated considerably, or you have other regressions, performance regressions, because in a particular environment, because you're using particular features and things like that. And these are things that are absolutely not caught by the TCK right now. So the question comes back to, if we have forked, okay, there's two streams of questions. One is, how do we really ensure compatibility? Because I think you want to make sure that your application behaves the same way if I go from one fork to the other.
Yeah.
Right. So the TCK is a lot of tests. I mean, there's 150,000 tests in TCK. And what it does is it tests compatibility from a functionality point of view. So it's a functional set of tests. What you're talking about is non-functional. You're talking about memory. Memory usage is non-functional.
I mean, that was an example. But
Yeah.
There's all kinds of other things we talked about.
So you can, TCK will test against functionality. From a non-functional point of view, that's open to interpretation because, of course, the JVM spec says you have to do certain things. It doesn't say how you have to do them. So there's a lot of leeway there for how things actually happen. So I don't think there's an easy way of actually being able to define a test suite that would test non-functional requirements because the fact that it's ambiguous in terms of the spec.
Wasn't this always a problem? I mean, IBM had a JDK and WebSphere 3.5 that certainly behaved differently from the Oracle JDK, and I know because my automated builds would be different.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole point of building Zing was to make it behave differently.
Yes, of course.
There's another question back there.
So I sort of get from this discussion how, let's say, a good actor in the community would be behaving in terms of, there's an issue found, we put it in our own supported JDK, and then we like backport the fix upstream, and then from there hopefully it gets backported to the older versions. But maybe for Oracle's case, do we have any insight as to what the heck they're doing? Because they're basically creating their own fixes and then not open sourcing them right after the first 6 months of support have gone away, and now it's in, it's up to the community to maintain. So how are we going to get to eventual consistency there?
That's not true that they do open source them. They don't open source them the release that you want. So if there is an issue, they eventually will push the fix to, what's the kind of 13?
Yeah, like bleeding edge.
Yeah.
But the problem is backports don't always backport cleanly, right?
Absolutely, and that's a problem. And eventual consistency could be on the latest Java, but maybe not 8, because those are probably, Kirk is right, probably those have forked.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
Find the polite correct answer.
I think it's a problem. I think it's a question of how significant is it a problem, and I suspect it's a bigger problem in the ecosystem that Kirk lives in than the ecosystem that I live in, just because you're dealing with lower level stuff all the time.
Right, yeah, so now I'm kind of thinking what I was trying to say. One of the problems that we face as well is that because Oracle only contribute the source code patches to the current release of the JDK. So at the moment that's 12 and will shortly be 13. So okay, that's fine. So what we can do is we can take those source code patches and we can then backport those to older versions. That's sometimes harder than it might seem because of course things change. So backporting those fixes can get harder the further back you go. But we also face another big problem, which is that since JDK 9, Oracle have started removing things as well. And that becomes a problem because if something doesn't exist in JDK 12, there will be no security patches or updates or bug fixes for that. So there's nothing to backport. So it makes the problem of how to address potential security flaws and bug fixes harder the further forward we go because of this issue of the fact that things are being removed as well as, so if you take JAX WS for example, that's gone, so if there's a bug found in that, Oracle are not fixing it, so somebody else has to fix it. So that's the thing that is going to cause more issues as we move forward. Corporate, yeah, well.
Sorry, I'm going to steal the mic one more time. So are we saying that we're almost viewing an end state of this ecosystem of eventual consistency outside of Oracle, and Oracle's kind of out in the heavens doing what it wants to do? Because that's basically what we're talking about here, right? On supported versions, long-term supported versions of Java, there will be times where you have no reference implementation of a security fix, and then somebody will have to create that. And it doesn't sound like Oracle's going to consume that from the open source world because they'll already have it built in their own way. So I'm not sure what the state here is.
Yeah, as I say, I think the security issues for the current release are reasonably stable. Yeah, yeah. But for older versions where, like I say, where things disappear, that becomes more of an issue. So yeah, you're absolutely right that we have to address that in some way.
Is Oracle not a member of that security
Oh
group?
yes, yeah. They
Because
started-
Oracle still has to patch their Java 8 and Java 11.
Yeah, but they're not open sourcing that.
I'm not asking about that. I'm asking about the private security group that the vendors are a member of and talking on.
Yeah, I must admit that I suppose because this is only something that's been going on for a short space of time, we probably haven't hit any situation like that yet. So it's not clear what would happen. I know that there has been some discussion, I think I can probably say this without revealing too much. So for example, JavaFX has come up as something where some people have identified some things that needed to be addressed. And so there's been a discussion around that. So that's not, that is something which is no longer part of the Oracle JDK. So hopefully that will be resolved.
Question right there.
What is, in your perspective, the bigger problem? JDK compatibility or JVM compatibility? Because there are like 10 vendors of JDK and 5 big JVMs in use.
I don't really understand the question. Can you elaborate on it?
Well, one axis is different JDKs where there are many forks. The other issue may be that there are multiple Java virtual machines, such as OpenJ9, the one from Azul, Hotspot from Oracle, and probably a few others.
I think that's it, right? There are only 3, but we can include Graal too. Right? And Thomas wakes up. So the one of the difference between the JVMs is that the code base is largely different. I mean, Zinc used to be once upon a time Hotspot, but it has forked like dramatically from it, as I understand it, right? Is that correct? Yeah. So the JVMs are basically more or less rewritten from scratch, where probably the OpenJDK libraries are probably based on the same, on the same code base. So I would say it's harder for the JVMs to, to ensure compatibility. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, from a JVM perspective, you've really got sort of 2 things. So if you look at Zing from Azul, then what we did was we took Hotspot as our source base, and then we've replaced certain things in that. So, for example, we took all the garbage collectors out and we put in a thing called C4. We took out the C2 JIT compiler. We put in a thing called Falcon. So we replaced certain sections of that. The IBM side of things is completely different because that's a clean room implementation. So the idea was that their engineers didn't look at the source code of Hotspot. They simply worked from the spec and built the entire JVM from scratch. So from a compatibility point of view, that's where the TCK comes in, because they test against the TCK to ensure that functionally the execution of bytecodes works in the same way, the way that things are supposed to work from a JVM perspective functionally works. From the rest of the JDK, so JDK compatibility, that I don't believe there's anybody who doesn't use OpenJDK as their source code base, because nobody, because it was GNU ClassPath, didn't they? They tried rewriting their own libraries, and that became Harmony, and that all disappeared. So, no, I think they've always used.
OpenJ9 is OpenJDK class.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Oh yeah, long.
Yeah. So the GNU ClassPath project.
Distant Galaxy, yeah.
Websphere 3.5.
Yeah, so from a JDK, rest of the JDK perspective, it's just down to whether there's issues with backporting and fixes being done in a slightly different way.
That's interesting. So it might be interesting to the audience. So what happens, like a new version of Java comes out, or a new version of Graal comes out, and Tony, you guys use it in Graal in production, right? Or semi-production?
We use it as a JIT, yes, we do.
Right, okay, so...
Graal is a massively overloaded term.
Oh, excuse me, yes.
It's a VM, it's a JIT.
True enough, fair enough.
It's a way of life.
It's a mouthwash and a floor wax, right? I think it'd be interesting to find out what happens inside your companies when a new version of Java comes out. What exactly happens? What's the decisions? What's the decision tree, and what are the actions that take place? Would not just roll out, but education and, support and blah, blah, blah? What starts, what happens? Like 13 is released. What happens? Does anything happen? Is it a regular train that's coming, or is it a bullet train that's coming for?
I work on an express stop. When 13 comes out, literally nothing happens.
Okay.
When 11 and 17 come out, something happens, and that's the developers start looking at it, and we have some lunch and learns, and we start talking about features and, what are the business drivers for wanting to upgrade? Is there something that's going to make things more efficient, like in Java 8, or is it that we're upgrading because we need to get off of Java 6 before it expires? We use that as input when we're talking to the business and the product owners about when we want to upgrade. And then we start the long, slow process of actually doing so.
So what's the latency from you do all that work, the release comes out and you actually do a rollout, you make a decision. Is it days, months?
It's not days and it's not weeks. It could be months for early applications. It's definitely years for later ones. Remember, we just got off Java 6 for the very last application. Remember, financial institutions are extremely conservative. You don't want them to lose your money.
From my experience, what I've seen is when there's a new Java version out, so as I was mentioning earlier, there's a central team that will take a look at it and then decide if all the entire platform has to be upgraded to the new version or not. That is one. Second, all the applications are sent a list of things that will work or will not work. So we are supposed to actually assess it and say, is a business application implemented by that? If so, there will be funding and sourcing discussions happening, and you would submit like a budget request saying that, hey, this application will not be supported if this version is coming in, so we'll have to cater to this in terms of people and the cost that's required to upgrade the application. And then if a decision was made to upgrade the Java JDK version, then that starts like a developer evangelism, I would say. You would have people giving out talks and then explaining how to utilize new features. So that's encouraged, and then we do utilize a lot of Pluralsight and other platforms for educational perspective as well.
Right, and in similar latency, it takes
it definitely takes more than a year, I would say.
More than a year. Okay, it's interesting.
So, sorry, one other thing. When I said the months, those are only internal applications. We wouldn't do anything outward-facing within that time period.
No external. Okay.
Yeah, no, then we're going to be very safe and careful. It's things like the cafeteria app and the rating system and things that aren't going to be a big deal if they go down that we do sooner.
Interesting. And now we have Simon and Tony are both vendors, internal and external, right?
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, a new release of Java is just more work because we have to build a whole bunch of new versions of Java. But I do have a question, actually, that sort of, because we've got two people who are sort of like heavy users and conservative users, shall we say. One of the things that Oracle are pushing quite hard at the moment is the idea of continually updating the JDK. Maybe not in deployments, but at least from a point of view of testing, so that when you go from 11 to 17, for example, you will have already tested with 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, so you've done sort of incremental advances rather than doing a big 11 to 17 test and deploy. Is that something that you see would actually work for you, or is it just completely unrealistic to be able to do that, and you're going to go 11 to 17 as a big jump?
I think the latter works for us. It's going to be 11 to 17. I don't think so. There will be effort put into do 11 to 12 to 13 through that chain. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. I was at Code 1. I understand the benefits of going incrementally, so you know what your problems are, but we're not going to do anything about them, so it's wasted effort. It's easier to let the community as a whole do it. But I also want to speak for Code Ranch, because you mentioned that we're both conservative institutions. Code Ranch is a forum, right? If it goes down, it's not a big deal. And our upgrade cadence there is when someone feels like it, right? So it's not every 6 months, but it's not every 3 years either.
Yeah, so at Twitter, I mean, I guess it's up to #TwitterVM team to drive the move to the latest release. We will at least we've been on 8 for a while, so we're currently on the process of moving to 11. Simon was correct earlier that he said that The LTS concept is an Oracle concept. It's not like on OpenJDK, because OpenJDK you only get 6 months of updates. There are some advantages to being on LTS, because like maybe a lot of libraries would be only kind of LTS compatible just for practical reasons. So for now, at least we're doing 11 because it's LTS. And we tried to test the first services with 11. A lot of them came up and working okay. Some of them had some issues with stuff that was removed, and we are looking into dealing with those. But we're working closely with our libraries team that writes all the libraries that most of our services use, like Finagle, which is our synchronous RPC, and a few other things, to make the changes to be like 11 compatible. And after that, we're going to start moving services one by one to 11. And what that's done, 8 is done. We don't have people lagging back 2-3 releases. We try to move everybody to the latest one because we're a small team, my team, and also the CSL team, which is the team that supports Finagle, is also a small team that cannot support like many releases. So we need to be on the latest.
Any other questions from the audience?
Just out of curiosity, for the current, for the jump from 8 to 11, because like 8's sort of LTS, right? So from 8 to 11, is the primary blocker like the compatibility, like the breaking changes and stuff, or is some of that figuring out the support model now? Like, what percentage is what? Is it all one, all the other, or somewhere in the middle?
For me, it's what's the driver, right? From 8, it was easy to sell. Well, we can develop faster. We've got Lambdas. Even with Java 5, it was easier. With 11, there's a lot of new features, but there's not one that you can point to and be like, ooh, that's why we want to upgrade. So it turns into, well, we want to upgrade eventually because we should. We're also aware that, because we're skipping 9, there are some changes that we need to think about, even if we're not doing modules, like the changes to the directory structure, the JDK. So it's a bigger upgrade. There was no urgency to start. It's not the swiftest of things, but we'll do it eventually.
I think for us, to your first point, consistency is important. So we would first want to test it if application is working as is with current state. But then from a conversation perspective, the financials come first. So the contracts happen first. And then the developers would actually they would get information saying that, all right, we do have a long-term support contract with Oracle now for the Java 11, so you guys can play around with it.
And I just want to add to the second part of the question about vendor support. We're both working for companies that pay for commercial support. It doesn't change if you're paying for commercial support already, right? There are now more vendors that are providing some commercial support than there were a few years ago, so you have options at renewal time. But the commercial model hasn't changed between 8 and 11. It's just the version number that you're on.
Yeah, I think the jump from 8 to 11, certainly in terms of talking to a lot of developers, one of the things that people are facing is the move to modules. And it's not so much the fact that the JDK itself has been turned into a bunch of modules. It's more the fact that libraries and frameworks have to work with the module system, and specifically the issue of the encapsulation of internal APIs, which means you have certain command line flags that need to be set and things like that, which is causing some issues. But a lot of the libraries now are gradually moving to that, so it's becoming less and less of an issue to move that. So yeah, I guess it's probably 50-50 as to whether it's a technical issue or whether it's a licensing support issue in the move from JDK 8 to JDK 11.
For us, it's just a technical issue.
There's another question over there.
We here?
So a few points. I want to go back to the condensed release, the 6-month release pieces, and talk about the general market. Developers who do not work with low-level virtual machine stuff, general developers. I'm from Houston. Houston has more .NET presence because of the oil industry. So Java developers are far and few between. With that being said, at least I have not come across developers that pay more attention beyond Java 8. And that's what I've seen, unless other people see other things in the market. With that being said, other points that I see, so I have transitioned to do some front-end development, and I don't think so far we have talked about it yet in this talk. Last year, I transitioned to starting using React, and I've been doing Java for about 15, 16 years. My perception is this cadence release of 6 months is heavily to compete with Node, where Oracle lost enterprise Java for whatever reasons, and now they want to keep Java in the market. I'm not talking against Java, I'm still a Java developer, but the adoption, general developers are not moving at the fast pace at which Java is moving. This morning I attended a session with Java about new features in Java. Most of the developers I come across do not even know about these features. And they do look like, if I may say 2 more points, they do look like syntactic sugar, the switch case and all these things, which is almost like ES6, ES7, and whatever the hell all that is. I want to know everybody's opinion on that.
I'm like bursting with energy to answer this. There were a lot of parts to that question. First of all, there were a lot of reasons behind the increase in the release cadence, and a few of us have given full-hour presentations on it, but it's not about competing with Node. It's about improving Java. Some of the features that Brian mentioned are syntactic sugar, or can be if you think of them that way, but some of them, like fibers, are not. Fibers are completely functional. And some of the things that are syntactic sugar are copied from other languages. Some of them are new to Java. It's a whole range of things. I also want to comment about the, we're New Yorkers thing. If I was working for a company that didn't pay for extended support, I would stay on the latest version of Java and upgrade every 6 months. I think that is a viable model if you're not working on something that's that mission critical. Who wants to go next?
Okay.
Not everything is syntactic sugar. And can I just expand to what you said? Fibers is one. I mean, also Valhalla and Panama are going to be very important and very useful changes moving forward. But they're taking a long time because they're very complicated. So.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing at the moment is with the faster release cycle, there's, as you say, a lot of kind of smaller features are being delivered more quickly. And so it is, the appearance we're getting at the moment is that there's not as much happening in some ways. But the idea of things like Valhalla, things like Loom, Panama, it means that there are some very big changes that are going to hit at some point in the future. And that's going to be that sort of shift that we got with Jdk 8, where suddenly we got lambdas and streams and everybody went, oh, that's really cool, we want to use that. And so that's going to be the driver to get developers interested in moving to, 16, 17, 18, whatever version it comes out in. On the enterprise side of things, that's a whole nother discussion. We need another hour for that.
I just want to say one more thing. If you look back to Java 1.4 or 1.5, it took developers years. I mean, I remember when 1.6 came out, and I was still convincing people they should use regular expressions. I remember when 1.7 came out, and I was still convincing people they should use generic. So I don't think the idea that people aren't using new things yet, and some of the things Brian talked about haven't even been released, is significant. The other thing is, if you only look at the LTSs, you're not really at a faster release cycle, you're at a more predictable release cycle. And that's something that's really important. So we're getting insights into it every 6 months, but we're not all sitting here upgrading every 6 months.
The other thing, just if I may add something, JavaScript frameworks have updates every week. Yeah, every day. So is that a good thing or a bad thing too, right? So the world is different now, and it's not just Java, JavaScript. The world is different. We have to move faster, right? It's just a fact of life. So it's not necessarily competing with Node. It's just adapting to the modern world. Yeah,
I wasn't specifically saying competing with Node, but that was one of the things I thought might be the case. And I don't think all the developers are moving at that pace, the point I was trying to make.
Sure, yeah, that's agreed. that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
But thank you. I think we're out of time. The word stop is in the back of the room. So thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you all for coming.